I'm doing mine now.
Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing today?
Great.
Good. So, is there anyone in here besides Ben that has not gotten one of these? Hold on a second. Okay. So this is not Matthew with a beard now. This is his twin brother
I'm
Ben.
happy that he has it. He looks like that. 'Cause I'm like, hey, that's not
I thought you just grew a beard or something. It's like, yeah, I was like, man, you're like Superman.
So just so everybody knows, this is Ben Vincent. You guys haven't met him. He works more in Kodiak than here. So, but he's happened to be in town today. So we're super happy to see you today. And you can tell all kinds of differences and things in Kodiak too during all this. But just wanted you to know because obviously you look just like your brother.
Probably.
Yes.
A few times, yeah.
Yeah, just like that. All right.
No,
so
he looks like you.
yeah, right.
That's right, that's exactly it, yeah.
Yeah, who is older?
That's me.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, he does look like.
Yeah.
You're the dominator. No. Was that the original?
Today. Okay, we'll just keep it.
Are you sure you have it for your later?
That one? That one? You want to try it?
I got it. I got it.
Let me get you a book. Hold on.
Great.
But she is. You need to for that. You need her to plug her brain. For that.
Right on. Yeah, so I like it. Open and play.
Thank you. No collar.
This is me. Hello.
Look at that. Oh my gosh. She is together.
I'm leaving it. Why don't you show up? I want to show face.
Okay. So what we're gonna do today, we're gonna need one more thing, hold on.
I've been looking in the dirt. I expose it up in the mail. Because, you know, I'm busy. I get my husband at the hospital at noon. Have I left? No. Well, my mom. Yes. Okay. It's good. It's just, oh my God. I have the listing coming up.
So does everyone have a 90% letter, mock 90% letter or not? You do?
So what?
The 90% letter?
Oh.
Does everyone have that
Yes.
inside there?
It's in there.
Take one of these and pass it along if you could. That is going to be the listing that you're going to be writing a contract on.
Gina, I'm showing this one later. Why is this in your class?
Oh, well,
Yeah.
if you have to write an offer later, you're going to be.
I already have it. I'm
You're
just
gonna
copy and paste.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you guys a blank purchase and sale agreement. And I'll let you start. How many do you have? Did you get one? You got one.
Looks like a full house.
Let me go get one more packet.
Gina, I
Yeah. If you,
I'm really excited.
Oh.
That's very
Oh,
important for
okay.
my fighters. He's a doctor, contractor, with fighters. So he wants trails, everything within one. Well, it is more so way.
Yeah, but they're offering 2.5%.
Yeah. Yeah, he seems nice enough.
Facebook posts.
That's funny, because I would look at my mother and I was like, weird, it's the same price as a house.
Got some extras up here. Who needs a packet? I do.
Thank you.
Anybody else need one? Oh, George and okay. Dan.
Oh, he's coming out here.
There you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome. There you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. He's a blank.
Yes.
No, I think. I have them already. She has them too, yeah.
Thank you. Blank one? Yes. I think we're passing those around. Did we run out of the MLS listings? Did we run out of those?
Maybe you have a couple of MLS listings.
Do you have this? We're passing
They've
them
already
around.
been
Did we run
prepared,
out?
yes.
How many people need this? 1, 2, 3, 5.
Friday night, so we're gonna be there at midnight. All weekend.
Oh, nice.
And then, yeah, I don't know, the friend of mine I'm going with, I don't know what his plans are, my cousin texted me yesterday, and it's like,
Oh, yeah.
let's be down here,
Yeah,
we'll
you're
take the
talking
river and do a little fishing. And
Yeah, yeah.
We're gonna be in the bus.
Yeah.
So take
We
it
need
back,
to-
we're staying all weekend,
Yes.
all this.
Yeah, yes.
Find some time,
There's
uh,
Oh, yeah. Like, when I saw this, you know, I think, oh, man, this is
It's like a fourth or fifth cousin,
Oh.
and I've never met him, I knew his mom.
Well, then, yeah.
I wonder if that's here, like his mom's son, so I've seen her like this.
Oh.
What am I supposed to? Text her, I said, "Ready for dinner one night," and seems like a good guy.
It's in, yeah.
River.
Okay.
Cut this out.
He big work stuff down.
Oh, yeah.
Go through everything, yeah.
This, absolutely, this is. Yeah.
So today we're painting and then, Friday will be time.
And then, you got the listing.
Yep, or then this one, right,
Yep, you got this
the
one.
purchase and sale.
Can I see a blank? Just to make a copy of that.
I don't think I've
Okay, does everybody have everything except for Shelby? I know she doesn't yet.
Yeah.
So what we're gonna do today is, you guys have a listing, the listing on Potter Heights. So you've shown the property, your client wants to write an offer. Maybe you've written an offer before, maybe you haven't. So what you have in your packet is you have a 90% letter from the person. You also have a mock purchase and sale agreement, which it kind of lays out what kind of timelines and things like that. So what I want you to do is I want you to take this mock purchase and sale agreement, do the best you can in filling out the purchase and sale agreement, with knowing that the buyer is qualified with the 9% letter that you see. So take the 9% letter, and on the 9% letter, if you'll notice, it's going to tell you the type of financing, right? It's going to tell you whether it's contingent on sale or lease of any other property, correct? Okay. It's going to tell you who the lender is. So with that information and your listing, I want you to fill out the purchase and sale agreement to the best of your ability. And then once you've filled it out to the best of your ability, we'll give you about 20, 30 minutes to do that. Then we're going to go over it, and it probably won't be perfect. You probably will miss things. You won't be sure how to answer some of the questions. But I feel like most of the time you learn best by doing than me sitting here telling you what to do. So I want you to struggle through a little bit and figure out the best of your ability, and then we're going to go over it. And the beauty is, I'm not a real buyer. So if you make mistakes, not a problem. It's okay, but try to take it seriously, try to figure it out, and then we're going to go through it. Some of you have done purchase and sale agreements before. Some of you have done many of them. Some of you have done none. So I know we've got a room full of a lot of different areas. So we're going to help each other out today. That's what this is all about. So do your best and then get going. If you have any questions, raise your hand or wave at me and I'll come and I'll help you out.
Is this one supposed to get? I don't think so. Oh, no.
Yep. And so see, as you see on here, I just want to explain. So your buyer, we're going to say your buyer's Jane Doe, because that's who John and Jane Doe, because that's who's on your 9% letter. So we're going to use them as your buyer today. And then I have on here, whether you put a date or you don't, you'll have to make some assumptions. So you'll have to decide, did your buyer bring in earnest money? What kind of earnest money did they bring? Was it a cashier's check? Are they wiring it? What are they doing? So you can make those choices on your own as going through here. I'm not going to give you that. Most people are going to bring in a check. So you could say personal check or whatever the case may be. And but the rest of this kind of gives you guidelines of what to do. So like on or before date of the letter. Date of the letter is your 90% letter. So the one that you have in your packet. So when you read this, I think you will be able to figure it out. I also made it easy for you. So the places that are marked here for the cost, that's based on a conventional loan. So lucky for you, they're getting a conventional loan. So I made it easy for you today. So those boxes are going to be the same. So you don't have to worry about not knowing which box to mark there. And we're going to kind of go through that and the different ones and how that changes and all that when we do the explanation. But for right now, that's going to be easy for you. And then the title, you can do you can choose whoever you want for title company and escrow officer, whoever. If there's someone you've met, someone that you like working with, you can put them. Otherwise, if you have no earthly idea, you've never met a single title person, then use Stephanie at Alyeska Title or Christy Nugent at Alyeska Title. You could use her if you have no idea who to use to fill in that. And I think everything else you should be able to figure out throughout the contract. The only thing that you're not going to be able to figure out right now is for the additional terms. So so kind of the scenario is the buyer went and looked at this property. They like the property. There's a possibility of another offer, but at the moment, there's not any other offers. So they felt like the property was pretty clean. It looked like it didn't need a lot of repairs. This buyer does not need help with closing costs. They're in good shape. They're well qualified. So with all of that in mind, write your offer accordingly. Okay? We'll give you about, we'll start at 20 minutes and see how you do. If you're not finished, not a big deal. And just holler at me if you need some help.
So she's assisting.
Says Elizabeth.
Gina, I meant to send that to you.
Oh,
It's
no worries. It's all good.
So is she a relative?
So yeah, I will explain this. This might be a little bit confusing. This property is listed for sale by owner. She is a licensed realtor. She has to be an MLS. There is a selling commission offered, as you see on there. And you do not have the right to negotiate straight with the seller. You are making your own appointments. There's showing time for this property. But there is a selling commission offered, so you don't have to worry about that with this. But it is a discounted commission on the list side. Is pretty much what they do. So you would treat it just as if it were any other brokerage, any other licensee.
Except for it does say contact seller for info about the home.
Correct.
Okay, I was like, I already called.
Yep.
Last name, last name. So that's not a listing number. Yeah, so she's not a broker. She for sale by owner systems license. So would that be a listing broker
No, I don't.
rather than her?
Here's
No,
another
this is
one.
Lydia.
So all of it is the same. Yeah, that's because this is the same.
They're all over this. This is.
Here's another one. That was the whole It stopped at my desk.
Does list her license number?
I have to go get you a purchase and sale real quick. Okay. Let me go get you a blank purchase and sale, but the task is you take this 9% letter with this listing and you write up an offer for Jane and John Doe for this property. Okay. Conventional loan. So this was on the 9% letter.
This doesn't have all the information. Some of it is-
This is. Times discussion on what to do with the Facebook one, 'cause those aren't licenses, right?
They all have because you get a full commission. Still have an office. So also, on your mock one, this property was used. So Julie Marshall, the license number and FSBO and the office number at the top of your mock is exactly what you would put on yours. So make that easy for you too.
No, but
Christie passed.
no, I didn't finish it.
You've done one or two.
but yours, yeah.
I
I wonder actually how many,
wonder how many.
how many in the past year that haven't gone accepted.
Yeah.
Had a lot of practice days.
Yeah. A lot of that. Yeah. So we're gonna give just a few more minutes to make sure we have time to go through everything. So do the best you can, and then whatever you have left, we'll probably just do together as we explain it. About 2 more minutes. When you guys get experience, you can fill this thing out in 15 minutes, 10 minutes.
Faster with the computer.
Yes, way faster with the computer. Okay, so, now what I want to do, thankfully, now what I want to do, let's go see Becky, she'll give you a whole packet.
Okay.
What I want to do now is I want to see if there's anyone who wants to volunteer to give me their contract that they filled out to use as an example. Nobody wants me to use, oh, Shelby will. Good girl.
There's,
Just one more thing to fill out.
yeah.
Okay.
I think it's terms and conditions, but
That's okay, we're not gonna have, we won't have any, we'll kind of go through that a little bit more. Thank you. Okay, so important things we're gonna talk about, make sure that everyone got everything filled out the way that they needed. Did everyone, date the top, today's date, 6/8/22. Brokerage for sale by owner Alaska, that information, and then selling broker, Jack White Real Estate. And we are office number 208. You should memorize that and know that. And you always, when you auto-populate these forms in forms in MLS, you will always, it will auto-populate the information for you. So today, when you get a blank form, you have to fill this out. I mean, like, you don't know the office numbers and stuff like that. And so that makes it a little bit harder for you, but that's why I gave it to you on the mock one, so you would have it and you'd be able to fill that in. But when you do the forms in MLS, it auto-populates a lot of information from the listing. So you put in the, the first thing you do with the forms. Does everyone know where the forms are in MLS? Yeah, okay. So when you go to start your transaction and you put in the listing number, then it's going to auto-populate a lot of this information for you. So it makes it a lot quicker than having to do it by hand. But obviously, that doesn't work in this type of a class setting, so that's why I had you guys do it by hand. So when you get to selling licensee, of course, that's yourself, and you put your license number in. Does everybody know their license number? Yes. If you don't, memorize that as well. Something we'll use over and over. And then listing licensee.
I have a question about that.
Okay, so listing licensee, you're always going to say on the listing licensee they represent the seller. How do you know that? How do you know they represent the
They
seller?
have the listing.
They have the listing, and do they have anything to do with your buyer? No. So if you're solely representing your buyer, which you are, they can't be doing neutral, correct? They can't be doing neutral because they don't have anything to do with your buyer. So there has to be, the only option has to be that they are representing their seller because they have it listed and they cannot do neutral.
Well,
Because you have your own buyer.
But this says they're assisting.
yes, it's
On the
assisting
listing.
seller without representation.
Okay, so
So-
yes, in this situation, they would be assisting the buyer without representation. They tell you that.
Up to them if they want to change that to something else, right?
Correct.
Is that-
Yes. And if they note that on here like this one, they are assisting without representation, which is what you put on your contract, which is correct. But if they don't have that noted, which the for sale by owner one is like the only one that they ever do that, you're always going to say they're represented by, they represent the seller. So just keep that in mind, because I've seen a lot of people come in with contracts and they leave it blank. Because they're like, well, I don't know what the relationship is with the listing license. I don't know what they're doing. Well, you kind of do. There's one of the two. They're either assisting without representation and they note that, or they are representing their seller.
Where did you see that on the list?
It's on the listing.
Where?
In the dish, is it?
Under confidential.
Confidential remarks, I believe. They put it in there.
So if you check the first one is representing the seller,
Mhm.
is that
She'll probably, what she would do most likely is
maybe amend it?
amend that. Amend it or send it back in a counter differently. And that's not the end of the world. I mean, because if she doesn't note it, you don't know that. There's no way for you to know. And it doesn't really affect the terms of the contract as much. It's not something the buyer and seller have to agree on that it's gonna be a problem, So I wouldn't worry about it all that much. But when they have it listed, thoroughly look through. So the people in here that did say assisting without representation, who marked that box? 3 people? Good job. 4 people? Good job. That's just like really reading through everything very thoroughly, carefully, and making sure that you know the information. So good job on that. Of course, you're representing your buyer only. You have the buyers as Jane and John Doe. Now, it's really important when you get your buyer's name, especially if they have a common name. If they have a common name like John Smith or, something very, very common. Maybe not as common. You're gonna for sure want to do a middle initial or a full legal name. Why do you think that is? Why would that be beneficial?
Because when you look up the information, like there's a lot of John Smiths, a lot of John Does, a lot of.
When it's recorded, it's a lot more complicated.
Absolutely. So you have a lot higher chance of getting your prelim back with a bunch of exceptions that have to be fixed because there's 20 John Smiths and they don't know if this is one of those John Smiths or not that has tax liens, child support liens, all these other things. So it makes it a real big hassle for your buyer to have to, well, I guess it does and it doesn't. So your buyer at that point would have to say, okay, my legal name is John Leonard Smith. And so they have to, then the title has to go back through all the information they've gathered to see if any of these liens or encumbrances or anything have to do with John Leonard Smith. And then they have to go and clear that. So to make things go quicker, more efficient, less hassle for everybody, if you put in the full legal name of your client, and most of the time they want their property to be recorded in their legal name anyway. So it's always just a good practice to put on the contract their full legal name. Just do that in the beginning.
Does that get changed by the title company along the way?
No, it's the buyer's choice how they want the what they want it to be recorded and how they want their house to be deeded. But it's just if they have an odd, if they're neighbor carried, there's probably not going to be a problem. There probably won't be a lot of
They just
neighbor
say there's
carried.
10 of her family.
Oh,
10 neighbors, but not 10 neighbor carriers.
correct. Okay. So, okay. Well, as long as there's not 10 neighbor carries, you should be okay. The other thing too that you want to find out when you're getting ready to write an offer like this is, are they going to want this to be done in a trust? Do they have a family trust and they want the house to go in a family trust instead of their own personal name? Some people are doing that these days. Now, if that's the case, then the lender has to know that. They have to make sure they're the only ones in the trust. They have to provide the trust documents. So it's a bit of a process. Sometimes it's easier to close it in your own name and let them deal with putting it in the trust after the fact. But you could do it either way, but those are the things you need to think about and do if that's what they want to do. So next, the amount of earnest money. So earnest money sometimes is listed. Is it listed on here what the minimum earnest money is? Nope. So if it's not listed, sometimes you're going to say, we'll just do 1% of the sales price, which is kind of industry standard. Or if your buyer says, you know what, I want to do a little more than 1% because I want them to know that I'm really serious about this, then they could do that. Shelby's client decided they want to do 10,000 earnest money. So we have 10,000 earnest money on this contract. And then, so of course you write out 10,000, in numbers, and then you spell out $10,000 as if you were writing like a check. Some of you may have never written checks, or anybody here has never written a check? Oh, good, thank God. You haven't? Oh, you have?
Ooh,
Oh, you just had a look on me.
I have a checkbook.
Okay, good.
I learned in elementary school. I'm all good.
Oh, good.
I had to teach my daughter how to write a check, so, you know.
I had to teach.
Most parents are teaching their kids how to do that, but some don't. I'm just making
They
sure.
had to go and get counter checks in order to rent an apartment. They had to go to the bank, be like,
Yes.
give us a couple of checks so we can write a check.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so the next thing that I see is evidence by, you have a choice, cash, which we don't accept cash, so that should never be marked. Personal check, cashier's check, note due on, and then the box 4. So just to make everyone understand that when you write on here $10,000 personal check, that means you have a $10,000 personal check that they have given you, and it's going to be deposited into the trust account. It's not, you're gonna get it in 24 hours, it's not they're mailing it, it's you have it. This right here is a receipt of that earnest money. When this document is signed, it is a receipt of that earnest money. So if you don't have the money and they are not giving you the money at the time of writing this offer, or they're not bringing it back to you prior to you submitting the offer, because sometimes, you go look at a house and you're like, I want to write this. You go, you do it right away. That's one more thing I want to touch on. If you're showing a house and they say, I want to write an offer right away, your best approach is to say, okay, I'll need earnest money. It's going to take me about an hour to put the contract together. So go get your earnest money check or whatever you need to do. Go get funds from the bank. And then meet me back in the office in like an hour to go over it with you. Don't bring them to the office right after you're showing and make them painstakingly sit through you filling this contract out for an hour. Don't do that for many reasons. One, they don't enjoy it. You don't enjoy it, and it stresses you out because you're under the gun and it's so easy to make mistakes. And really, if you've not already put together 6 transactions that we've reviewed for you, you need to be sending it to a manager to review for you before you have your buyer sign it. So you need to have time and give yourself time to do that before your client comes in and sits across the table from you. So make sure you do that. It's very, very important. So again, if they don't have the money, so they don't have the money and they don't want to put earnest money down for some reason, which I highly encourage you to have your clients bring earnest money when they write the offer. Why? Why do you think that's important?
Because it's not an offer until it's got consideration.
Consideration, correct. This is consideration for the offer. What is another reason why you want to make sure they bring the money in?
It's done. You don't have to follow up and chase it down.
Absolutely.
You don't have to worry about the contract being invalid and if you get it late or whatever. It's just.
Yes. All of those reasons. Perfect, great reasons. Another one is if you do end up being in multiple offers and one person has earnest money has brought in the money, they have consideration for this offer. The other person says, nah, if you decide to accept my offer, I'll maybe bring the money in a couple days after, I write the offer. Who do you think is more,
Has more skin in the game.
100%. They have more skin in the game. They're serious about it. They're organized. They got everything together. They're ready to move forward. The person that has the money, not the person that says, maybe I'll bring it in a couple of days. So as a realtor who's been doing this for 25 years, if I get 2 offers coming in and they're exactly the same, one has money, the other one does not, then I'm going to bring that up to my client. And of course, it's always their decision of what they want to do, whether they want to accept or they don't. But when you explain to them, this person brought money, this person says they'll bring it in a couple of days, who do you think's, maybe more serious about your property? They're going to say the one that brought the money. I'm going to take that one. I mean, that's human nature. Yes.
Would you call the other agent if there's no earnest money and say, hey, what's the earnest money check?
Well, you can always, I wouldn't do that because they already submitted your offer without it. So, they don't have it. But what you could do, if someone
does write an offer, and this is what I always do. In fact, I never accept you bring it to me in 48 hours or 3 days or any of that. What I would do on the listing side, to get an offer, I would counter them back, and I would say, upon acceptance of this counter, earnest money to be deposited upon acceptance of this offer, of acceptance of this counter offer. So essentially, before they can sign the counter offer, they have the money and it's going into the trust account. And I want a copy of the check and I want to know it's deposited. So that's how I would always counter someone, because I don't want to leave my seller out there hanging with no earnest money and take their house off the market.
What was that again? Upon acceptance of this counteroffer?
Yeah, earnest money to be deposited upon acceptance of this counter offer. Mhm.
And it's, because a lot of times, we've seen it where buyers are submitting offers saying that it'll be deposited upon acceptance, but that's not true, because,
Well,
Once-
you can't do that.
right, because once the seller signs it, it's been accepted,
Correct.
and there's no earnest money in deposit, so they're already,
Out of contract.
right. But you
Yes.
can on a counter because you're putting it back on their
Yes.
terms.
Yes, yes, exactly. And that's why you can do upon acceptance on a counter, because they have a day to sign the counter, so they can get the earnest money and then sign the counter. So you can say upon acceptance, it's deposited, it's given to the selling licensee. Now, Shelby brought up a good point. If you get an offer that says they'll give you earnest money upon acceptance of this offer, you can't do that because the buyer doesn't know the exact moment the seller is going to sign the offer. And so if they sign it at 8:00 at night, what is the buyer standing there with a selling licensee going, okay, what time are they going to sign? Let me give you my check. I mean, they would literally have to be doing that to be in compliance. And we know that's not happening. So they're automatically going to be out of contract. So do not ever write an offer and put on your purchase and sale that earnest money will be deposited upon acceptance, not on the purchase and sale, because you're already going to be out of contract with your buyer when that happens. But on a counter, you can do that. And I think we just explained why. Does everybody understand the difference?
I don't understand what account.
Because when you give someone a counter, you give them 24 hours, 48 hours to accept it, right? So during that time frame, they can bring the check in and give the check to the selling licensee. But because you're giving it to the buyer to sign. Otherwise, when you do a purchase and sell, it's going to the seller to sign, and you don't know when the seller's going to sign. The buyer's in control of when they sign and when they give the check with a counter. Get it? Okay.
But you've already made an offer to get a counter, so when you made the offer the first time, why isn't the escrow? I mean, why isn't that earnest money already in there?
Because the buyer chose not to do it, maybe the licensee said, oh, you don't need to bring me a check. We'll just say on the offer that we'll give it to them in 24 hours, 48 hours. But I guarantee you that buyer doesn't understand the difference or how important that earnest money is. On the most part, they're going with whatever the licensee told them. So it's a disadvantage for the buyer to do that. It's always more of an advantage. I mean, you should always tell your buyer, if you're going to write a contract, I need the earnest money when you write it. They say, I don't want to bring the earnest money now. That's their choice, but you should always encourage them to bring the earnest money because that's the best benefit for them. It makes the strongest offer for them.
So if they don't bring the earnest money, they don't want to bring it, can you do note due on and then like a deposit date?
You could do note due on, and I would say on by a specific date or within 24 hours of acceptance of the offer, because that's doable. You can say within 24 hours, you just can't say upon acceptance because you don't know when that moment's going to be, but you could give them 24 hours to do it. And I know that, and I think, I know that people, they don't want to put the earnest money in because what if it doesn't get accepted and then I have to wait 14 days to get it back. I get all that, but they also can just leave it in a trust account. And then when the next property comes along that they want to write an offer, it can be transferred to that property. So they don't have to keep getting money back. If they're gonna be buying a property in the next few months, then they could just leave it there and put it onto that
In
property.
this market, are you seeing anybody accepting offers without earnest money?
People
like,
are, I
are
think
they
it's they're
still?
crazy, but
Okay.
people are.
There was
Yeah.
a rehab, they said, don't bring earnest money, just know that you're gonna do it.
Well, I mean, if a seller says that's what they want and they're okay with that, then that's their decision, yes.
Gina, can you, explain the trust account a little bit more? Because my clients are always asking, where does it go? You say it's going into Jack White, but
Yeah, so Jack White, so every broker has to have a trust account that they hold earnest money. That cannot be commingled with any other funds, and it is a non-interest bearing account.
It's not being used for operations or pay
Nope.
salaries or anything
Nope.
like that.
It's a trust account just for earnest money. And
so if I'm John Doe, it's gonna go into John Doe's trust account.
no, it goes into Jack White's trust account, but it's allocated to John Doe in accounting. So the trust account, has hundreds of thousands of dollars in it, from everyone's earnest money, right? But each earnest money amount is allocated to a specific buyer. That's why when you tell your client to wire money into our trust account for a transaction, you have to send a sales report at the same time so we can connect that money to that wire. Because the wire comes in the trust account, nobody knows who it goes to without the sales report. So we need a sales report whenever your client wires money in. So that's why.
What is the process or where do we find the information if we want to have our clients wire it, number one?
You can just ask me or Gabe, or we'll give you the wiring instructions, or accounting. Yeah. We give them out to you at the time just in case they change.
Okay.
So it's not something you need to keep on your computer and send out to people like a year from now, because sometimes, a company may change a bank, or, you could get, you could change banks or something could happen. So if your client wired it to the wrong account, they will never get it back. So always ask us for the wiring instructions at the time of your wire.
And that's like a check or on this section, check,
It would be other, and you would say wiring to trust account.
trust account. Okay, and what if, do you just know if somebody puts a earnest money in, deal doesn't go through and it's just sitting there in the trust account?
Well, you fill out on your sales
Right.
report, you say DFT,
Mhm.
and then hold in trust account. And then that goes to accounting, and accounting knows that this deal is not closing and it's just to be held until you write another contract. When you write the next contract, you have a new sales report saying it's transferred from this other property to this property. There always has to be a paper trail for all the money all the time. So if you have money in there and you write 4 offers and finally you get the 5th one done and you didn't do the paper trail, it's gonna be a nightmare for you,
So this
because you're gonna have to do the paper trail for all the ones that got rejected, for all the ones that DFT, and you're gonna have to do sales reports for each one and do it. It's better to do it along the line as it happens. Otherwise, it's a headache for me and Gabe and you. But we
What's
have
the
to have that.
wording again? If you turn in your offer, it didn't get accepted, you write a new sales report
Uh-huh.
to the accounting and stuff.
So on the sales report, it has the little boxes underneath that it says it DFT. It's, it'll say, offer DFT, offer was rejected, offer was withdrawn. So
Okay.
it gives you, thank you. It gives you all of these options. So offer rejected or withdrawn, you'll check this box. Attached, you're supposed to attach the rejected or withdrawn offer in writing. Refund to buyer, hold earnest money in trust. So you could say refund to buyer, hold in trust, give it to the seller, or transfer it to a new transaction. Or if the transaction defaulted, we need an attached signed termination agreement. So it tells you right here what we need and how to do it.
And I
So
know,
just follow the
I
directions.
know Gabe has told us, like, he likes to just take the copy of the original sales report we
Yes,
filled out
mhm,
and write the new information on the bottom
yes.
when it's fallen through or hasn't been accepted or something, and then just turn it in again.
Yeah, and I have to, we have to sign off on that. The manager has to sign off on transferring.
Yes. Is that only for DFTs when it was a wire transfer coming in, or is that
No.
for all DFTs?
All
So
transactions.
we'll always do the,
Yes,
fill that out
yes.
for the earnest money, so
Yep.
that it sits there.
So
Okay.
anytime an offer is rejected, withdrawn, or terminated, you fill this out. Because we have to know what to do with the money that your buyer has in our trust account.
Okay,
So whether it's a wire, a check, cashier's check, doesn't matter.
okay.
It's just money in general.
And then that would be on the individual,
You're the licensee that represents the buyer, it's on you.
okay, then I need to do one of those.
Okay.
Me too.
Here you go. If you need help, just let me know.
I probably will.
Okay, no worries. That's what we're here for. Okay,
Lastly, okay,
Yes.
since it's already in the trust account, we're writing a new offer.
Yep.
We got it in the trust account, do we just write it as personal check or it's been in?
no,
in
you would
trust?
say other held in Jack White trust account.
Okay,
So that's where it is, yes.
So let's say, not just hypothetically, that we submitted an offer and they countered us
Mhm.
and we just didn't accept the counter.
Uh-huh.
That's what we can turn in, is
That's rejected.
that's,
So that would be rejected counter. So
okay.
your buyer should write across rejected on the
Okay.
counter. And then you turn in the PSA that
With-
says submitting a counter.
Right.
That the counter was rejected. And that's what we need.
Okay.
We need the loop closed. So if you just always remember that, we need the loop completely closed. So we can't have a purchase and sale out there that we don't have it fully executed to say either the seller refused to submit a counter. So like at the back page here, let me show you. The back page of this purchase and sale agreement. The seller has an option. The seller can accept the foregone offer as written. So they could do that. They can make an attached counter. So they sign this and they provide a counter to the buyer. Or they can say, I reject the foregoing offer, decline to make a counter. So every offer you submit, there needs to be a decision made on this offer. Not an email from the other side that said, they didn't like your offer, they accepted another. We need the loop closed. You need the loop closed for your buyer as well. There's no way to know that that seller saw your entire offer without them initialing every page and signing on the back saying, I rejected it. So that's very, very important. I know it's hard to get sometimes, but it's very important.
So if it's the situation, like I said, where we just didn't sign the counter offer, when I do the line through, because there's not a rejection line
Correct.
for it, when I do the line through, do I need to have my buyers sign that, or can I just say rejected, because clearly the buyers haven't signed it?
I think you should have the buyer just, did you sign that page and have them initial where it's
Where it says
rejected? It's the
rejected.
It's
Okay,
the
then it
very
just
best,
covers your,
it's the very best business practice, because how do we know that the buyer said, I want to reject it?
Yeah.
Because what happens is later on, you don't have any paper trail. And what you need is you need a third party. Always think of it in this terms. You want a third party. They could look at this contract or look at what's transpired in your contract and fully understand what has happened. If you have what we just described, offer, counter, here's the counter, rejected, very clear. Anyone can look at that and say, okay, the buyer rejected, they initialed, we know what happened. If we have a contract, we have a counter, the seller sent over the counter, no signature, no rejection, nothing on the buyer. Did the buyer ever see this? Did the buyer get it? You don't know. The third party has no idea what happened without that loop being closed.
So when they reject your offer, they
Yes.
should also be signing every page.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because otherwise you don't know
They saw every
Maybe
page.
they didn't even know that I was
Correct.
offering something in
So-
the middle.
Yep, so when you bring an offer to us and to transfer earnest money, and you say, well, they didn't accept my offer, but the licensee gave me an email and told me they didn't accept my offer. I'm gonna say, go back to that licensee, have the seller sign it and say they rejected the offer. And if you can't get it back from the licensee, we're probably gonna call the broker and have the broker get the licensee to do it. And it's not fun to do after the fact. It just isn't. Everyone gets irritated. And so if we can do it up front, it's a lot easier. And just blame it on Gabe. Blame it on Gabe.
Gabe won't give them their
Just
money
say-
back without us.
Yeah, just say, this is a requirement of our company. Gabe requires us to be able to show that that seller saw every page of the contract and terminated. And that's what's required of the PSA. Why is the line there for them to sign if it's not something that needs to be done? I mean, it's there for a reason. So just don't be lazy, do your job, and get it done. You're also supposed to keep every single purchase and sale agreement that you write for that client, regardless whether it's rejected or not. It needs to be in SkySlope. Because you have to have proof down the line that you wrote the offer and it was presented, whether it was accepted or not.
So an offer written like this is good until it's either rejected or unless there's a date on there that they haven't had an answer within so many days or whatever. So if you're on the seller side, if you're selling a property and you get 5 offers in, you just let 4 of them sit and you're negotiating one. Is that, you just let those 4 sit while you're negotiating?
What do you mean?
Okay,
You should be looking at, the seller should have looked at every single one of them and said, I don't want to respond to those 4. I only want to respond to this one because it's the best, it's the one I like the best or whatever.
Okay,
Now,
so-
what you're saying, yes, in a way, you do kind of let those sit to see if you can negotiate, provided they're not going to expire.
Okay.
Because they could expire.
And
So
once you get one fully executed, then you go back and
reject the rest.
reject the others.
Yep. Exactly. Because you don't know. You know, they may not. If you just sign this one, then everything is fine. Then you would just reject the rest. But if you're sending a counter about anything, then it's not a done deal. The buyer still has to sign off on that counter, even if it is something, in your opinion, minor. So you definitely want to do that. And it's nice to have those too, because if the first one DFTs, then you can go back to those other ones and say, hey, are you interested? This one's, or ask them if they would like to be considered as a backup. And then they would need to present the proper forms, if you guys were here last week, the backup forms and all that. And so that's always helpful too, to have that extra buyer in the pocket and in case the first one falls apart. So let's keep going through this. This is why we do this. It takes like a long time to go because everyone has questions because it's very important and there's a lot of ifs with this. So then we have, so we talked about the money and then we said, shall be held in trust. We're always going to want it in the selling broker's account, right? We always want their earnest money here. Why do we always want their earnest money here?
So we retain the feel of it.
Because Gabe holds control when it's here. We want our broker, if there's a dispute in the earnest money, you want our broker to be making decisions for our client. You don't want the other side making decisions for your client because they're probably not going to be looking at the best interest of your client because they represent the other client. So, and when they say they want it to be held in the title company, what are your thoughts on that? Is that a good idea, bad idea? What's the issues that could happen there?
Still not in control of it if it's not the title company.
They don't want it.
Absolutely. Yep. And what happens if there's a dispute?
Title company won't do anything until this dispute is resolved between the two. It just sits there. They won't make a decision.
Absolutely. And so it's just not fun to deal with because you can't get a decision made and it holds up the earnest money for a long time. So not a good idea. You always want to try to keep it in
What
our,
are some of the reasons? I know it's happened very occasionally, but I a reload company or
they don't usually, I mean,
I'm trying to think
This
why
should-
we've ever had. I think we've maybe done it once or twice.
there are a few brokers in town who don't have an accounting system. And so they want it to be held in a trust account because they don't want to be responsible for having to take the check to the bank and deposit it themselves. We actually had one that said we don't have a trust account set up yet, so we can't hold it, which is completely against the real estate commission. But that's required for any brokerage. But a lot of times it's something like that, or they, I don't know what reason. Sometimes if people hear from another state and that's the way it was done where they were before, they want it to be done that way. They feel like it's more secure that way. It's not though. It's harder to make a decision or get a decision made if there's a problem. So then next we talk about improvement situated. So it's going to be whatever city that we're in and the zip code. And it's you can always put Anchorage Recording District. You put the address of the property, the legal description of the property. Did anyone have any problem filling any of that out? Nope.
Unless it's out in the valley, then it's not Anchorage.
Correct. If it's in Wasilla, it's going to be the Palmer Recording District. So you'll want to make sure that you put that if that's the case. We have here, they do intend to occupy the property. So what would you need to find out there? Would you ask them? Does lending need to be able to match that as well? So you want to make sure that the type of loan is owner occupancy loan. If they're going to be occupying, that it's a investment loan. If they're not going to occupy, that's very important. They can't say they're going to owner occupy and have every intention in leasing. That's mortgage fraud. So make sure you don't have people telling you, well, I'm going to just do this, but I'm actually probably going to lease it. That's not okay.
Also, back to the purchase price, you want to make sure that matches your 90% letter, and your 90% letter doesn't say they qualify for 800,000 when you're offering 749.
Yeah.
Because then it's just giving away.
Yeah.
If
Those
those
count.
That they'll do more. Correct. What I do a lot of times, just for efficiency reason, and I think this is good practice. Some other people who are seasoned probably do this as well. But say the listing price is 800, but you're going to offer 750. What I typically do is I'll ask the lender to do a 90% letter for 750 that I'm writing the offer for, and also to send me a 9% letter for the list price. So if they counter somewhere in between, I can go ahead and provide that 9% letter immediately upon signing the counter, and they know that they're qualified for the loan.
That's super important information because that's happened to me and then I don't hear back all weekend
Yes,
because the lender's going out of town or something.
Yep. exactly.
That's super
While you have them on the line, just get everything you need. You
So
know,
they
do a
agree
net
at
sheet.
775, then that's
Yeah, it's
fine.
okay,
You
'cause you-
provide the 800, but
Absolutely.
you're only, gotcha, that makes sense.
Yeah, so you get it for what your offer is, and then you get it for the list price. I mean, if you think it's gonna go over list price and you're in that kind of situation, then of course you want it higher. But if you think it's gonna be somewhere between that and the list price, then just get it at list. And if it comes in between, who cares?
Do lenders ever, tell you as an agent, okay, they're approved up to 800,000, here's your 90% letter where you can change the amount and allow us to change it up to that amount?
I know Rocket Mortgage does that.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, you can actually, they'll give you a portal and you can go in, you can put whatever amount you want and print your own pre-approval
Isn't
letter.
that the liability on you?
Not if they've already told you it's up to an amount, once you go, they won't let you write it for
Okay.
over that amount.
That's
It has
probably
to be
the only
under.
thing you can change.
It is.
No other criteria.
Yeah, no other criteria, only the price. But you could print however many you want and do it yourself. But on the most part, most lenders, they have no problem. You just tell them what you want, they'll send it. You should always have them send a net sheet too. That's really helpful, especially so the buyer, you make sure the buyer knows what their payment's gonna be, what their closing costs are gonna be based on this loan amount. Super helpful. Let's see. So we have the price and then down payment, including earnest money shown above. I always just put minimum, and the reason why I put minimum is because say they go in, they get pre-qualified, and they plan on putting 20% down. And then the interest rate goes up, and then they realize, maybe I don't want to put 20% down, maybe I just want to put 10% down. Well, if you put minimum, then that can change without you having to make changes to the contract. Because remember, in the contract, it says if you change anything with the loan terms or financing, you have to get approval from the seller. So you don't want to have to go back to the seller and write an addendum if they change the down payment. Because the truth of the matter is, most of the time, they don't even tell you. Lender doesn't tell you, buyer doesn't tell you, they changed it because they don't think you need to know. And so you could be out of contract and have no idea that they're out of contract. So if you put minimum, that protects everybody from not being out of contract.
What number are you on?
2.
Also, do you want the seller to know you're putting 50% down?
Right, exactly. No, you don't necessarily want them to know. It's none of anyone's business. Now, the benefit of a buyer putting that much down, the one thing that you could do, if you know a buyer's putting a large down and you're not concerned with it appraising, then you could take away, you can ask the lender, is there going to be an appraisal required for this loan? Because typically, if they put a large down, the risk is, there's not a big risk for the lender. So the lender will sometimes waive the appraisal, which is great to know up front, because then that saves you a lot of time. Get through the home inspection, you can go straight, get closing quicker. The seller likes that because they don't have to spend $850 on the appraisal. So that's something you also want to kind of know and keep in touch with a lender and ask about that. That can be really beneficial for both sides. And if also when you're going in to write an offer, if there's multiple offers and your buyer is putting a large down, even if they're financing or putting a large down, not requiring an appraisal, very well qualified, then that is par with a cash offer. So if your buyer's up against a cash offer and they're like a super strong one that's getting lending, but maybe theirs is a little higher, that additional information could make it where they chose your offer over the cash offer. So always keep those things in mind and just be a friend with a lender, ask a lot of questions, make sure you understand what's happening. Any questions on that? Okay. Let's go a little further, whether they do or they don't intend to occupy the property. We talked about that. You have to choose the right property type. Why choosing the right property type is important?
For the requirements.
Loan requirements, appraisal, all of that. So
COSA, like
everything. So
PUD.
PUD is planned unit development. Planned unit development. So that means if they're in a planned unit development, sometimes there's dues for that, sometimes there's not. Independence Park's a planned unit development. Doesn't really change the fact that it could be a single family home in a planned unit development. So it just says it's in a planned unit development.
Where are you at?
Under property type.
Page 1.
Will it be clear on the listing if it's a PUD?
Should be, yeah. And the tax records will say too. So you can find out there. But if you just put single family condo, I mean, if you're doing a condo, you're in a different purchase and sale agreement anyway. You've got this one, but I'm sorry, I'm the listing. But when you're doing if you do single family condo or duplex, triplex, it's fine. Otherwise, what I would do is I would click the box other, and if it's a 0 lot line, I would just write 0 lot line. Does everyone know the difference in a zero lot line and a condo and a duplex? Anybody not know? Not sure? Okay. So single family home, you own the property, and typically it's not connected to anything else. Something can look like a duplex, but it's called a zero lot line because it's two separate properties attached. So you have two separate owners, where a duplex, it looks the same, two separate dwellings connected, but only one owner owns all of them. And typically with a zero lot line, you're gonna own land. A condo, you're not gonna own the land.
Sometimes you can tell when they're painted different sides,
That helps too. Yeah.
different colors.
And that's another thing that you tell people too, is, you know, when you're buying a zero lot line, I would say the negatives of that can be you own a structure that's connected to another person's structure. You have to agree when you change the roof. It's difficult to change half the roof. It's difficult painting half the house and it not match the other side. You know, it just doesn't look good. So you always want to try to be able to work with your neighbor and, you know, try to plan to do the whole roof at the same time, paint the whole house at the same time, that kind of thing. But sometimes that doesn't work out. And you could, at some point during your ownership, end up in a situation like that. So you just want to bring it to their attention so they understand that could happen and they're not surprised when it happens. So the next section, if it's an all cash offer, then you're gonna put a date here to have sufficient funds. This one is gonna be new financing conventional. Now, what would you use for additional funds or to show you have sufficient funds if it were a cash offer?
Letter from the bank.
Yes, that's my favorite one. A letter from the bank, from the banker writing a letter saying that this buyer, their name, has sufficient funds for a purchase price of this amount. Liquid funds to purchase a home at this price. That's what you want. I don't suggest, some people do it, you can do it, but to give a bank statement showing how much money they have in the bank, that it's over that amount. Some buyers are like, I don't care, I just want to do that, I don't want to deal with a banker, or they have an online banking and it's difficult to do that. But most people have like a financial advisor, or if they have, you know, $750,000 in their bank account, they most likely have a personal banker. And the personal banker can write that check or write that letter. But if you are going to give them the account, make sure you redact very well so you can't read through it, their account number, their social security number, their address, their name has to be on there. You have to identify with the name and the balance, but the rest of that information is confidential.
Problem with that though, I had someone submit that to me and then the seller's like, well, they've got a lot of money in their account, so they can go up.
Exactly.
So that was a negative.
Exactly.
Because they gave.
Same thing with a 90% letter. You know, you give them a 90% letter with more than they qualified for, then they already know they qualify higher. They're gonna probably counter you higher if you didn't write a full price offer. So, exact same situation. So that's why the letter is the best. And when you tell your client that, you know, like, do you really want them to know how much cash you have? I mean, that doesn't put you in the best negotiating
buyers-
position.
I want them to know that I have money.
Well,
The buyers like that.
But you just need enough money to buy it, you know? So then the next due financing conventional, on or before the date here, the buyer should provide a letter from Home State Mortgage or whoever it is your lender is. You want to have a pre-qualification letter at the time of writing the offer. Otherwise, how do you know they qualify for this house? How do you know they have the cash? You don't know any of that.
And most likely if I were the listing licensee and I didn't get a pre-qualification letter, that would also be on my counter. Pre-qualification, letter, upon acceptance of this counter offer.
So what would go in that blank?
Hmm?
What would you put in that blank?
Well, if you didn't have it with you, it'd be when the lender said they would get it to you, or when they're gonna go get pre-qualified to do that.
And if
So-
you have the letter with you, what do you put in there?
Whatever the date of the letter is. Yeah. Yes,
So it's 7 o'clock on a Saturday night and they say, oh, I'm gonna put an offer in this now, and they don't have a call.
so if you are showing, if you're showing property for a client, you should always make sure that they're pre-qualified prior to showing a property.
Right.
Always have, if you're gonna be showing a property on the weekend and you won't know exactly what it is, but you should be working with a lender that you have their cell phone number and they will give you a 90% letter on the weekend.
Okay.
And if you don't have a lender like that, you should get a different one. Because there are plenty out there that are happy to do that. The lender I use a lot for my clients, she is like on speed dial. Like I ask for something, she has it to me immediately. I called her yesterday, I have a client, this is what they're doing. She called him in 10 minutes. This morning, she texted me, application's complete, he's ready to go.
Nice.
And that's Tara Mallet at Home State. And she's great.
That was the
So-
problem we had, is that the lender went out of town and 3 people were putting offers in. We didn't submit our pre-qual letter because I couldn't find the lender. He was out of cell range.
Yeah.
And we didn't get the house because we couldn't find the lender.
So if they should be communicating with you that they're going out of town, if you've got a buyer that they know is like looking, at the worst case, have them write you a 90% letter for what they qualify for. It would be better to submit a 90% letter higher than what you're writing an offer for than have nothing at all.
So you should do that right from the get-go.
Yep.
Because I've had buyers that pick these lenders that never answer their phone.
And you have that conversation with your buyer. Just say, I'm a little bit concerned because I've been trying to reach your lender. You should always try to call the lender when you find out they have a lender you're not familiar with. You try to call them and create a relationship with them and say, listen, these are my expectations. This is how the market is. I need to be able to reach you. Are you going out of town anytime soon? How do I reach you on the nights and weekends? And they go, well, I don't work then. Then you should go back to your buyer and you should say, this is going to be an issue for us. They're going to cause a problem when you decide because you only look at houses on the weekend. So what's going to happen when we can't provide that information and you want to write an offer and we don't have a 9% letter and there's multiple offers? You're going to lose. You're not going to get the house. So are you sure you want to continue with this lender? You might want to shop around. Your decision, but this could happen.
What happens if you have a buyer who's very like, oh no, that's my lender, that's my relationship. I'll go talk to my lender.
That's fine.
Okay.
But when they lose their house and they can't get the information they need, then that's fine because they're going to be mad at that person, not you. You did your thing. You can't make them, and you shouldn't encourage them to get a different lender, but you should educate them to, this is what I'm going to need when I write an offer, and that has to come from your lender. So you need to make sure the lender can do that. I'm sorry, we're keeping going. We're not giving you guys a break. You want a quick break? Are you dying to keep going? Okay.
Sorry. Have you ever submitted an offer without a 90% letter because you just couldn't get it like on the weekend or a 3-day holiday weekend?
Yes, yes, it's happened.
Yeah.
It has happened.
Well, that was the one that I had. It was the long holiday weekend, and we wanted to write an offer Friday. We didn't get anything until Tuesday because the lender went on vacation.
Well, I've had a situation where I had someone call me out of the blue Friday night that says,
you know, I worked with them in the past and they called me, I didn't know they were looking, they call me and they
You're in
go,
Arizona.
no, it was actually here, but
No, I'm
They're
just saying, like, you
yeah.
could be gone to, like,
Yeah,
just sometimes
absolutely.
stuff just pops up.
yeah, I mean, like totally popped up Friday night, hey, there's a house I wanna look at tomorrow. Like, okay, so we go and we look at it. I mean, they're well-qualified people, I've sold them houses in the past, but they didn't go and get pre-qualified, they just like saw this house and, you know, they've been looking for like a year, but they just, you know, were looking, this one just popped up. And so they, we went and we looked at it, they loved it. And so you're scrambling trying to do it. And that's where having good relationships with other licensees really help. Because I was writing an offer, it was with another licensee that I knew, known for years. And I said, they just called me Friday, it's the perfect house for them. They are pre-qualified. They just, I couldn't get in touch with their lender over the weekend. And so I will get it to you first thing on Monday. We're gonna write you a big earnest money check also, so you know, but we will get it first thing on Monday or as soon as I can reach them. And they said, okay, because they trust me, and that worked out. That doesn't always work out, but that worked out that time. So sometimes you can't help it. You know, if something pops up last second, you can't plan for it, but as much as you can plan for it, plan for it. Okay, so we talked about the lending. It's very important that you have on your 90% letter, if you notice the pre-qualification letter that you have, it lists on there that they have satisfactory credit, they have acceptable income, they have source of down payment, availability to close, and it's not contingent on the lease or sale of a property. It specifically states that on the 90% letter. And all 90% letters should have that on there to show, to be compliant with the purchase and sale. We do get 9% letters that do not have that information on there. It is your seller's decision whether they want to go forward with that or not. Sometimes what you can do is you can say, okay, well, this isn't really a pre-qualification letter because they didn't check all these things. Or you call the originator and you say, your letter doesn't state that you checked all these things. Can you send me an email confirming that you have checked all of these things? Because sometimes they have, you know, different lenders, they have a certain format for their pre-qualification letter, and the originator can't necessarily change that, but they still do all the things they need to do, and they're willing to write you an email saying they did check all these things, but that letter doesn't reflect it. So just make sure that those items were covered, and they did do those things. Because otherwise, you don't know if they qualify or not. The other thing that's important, the loan approval is or is not contingent on the lease or sale or recording of any property. That's super, super important. Sometimes on the additional terms, they don't write subject to selling this property at whatever. They don't have to do that. They have to check one of these two boxes, but if you're in a rush and you're going through here and you don't see that, that's a big deal. You need to know if your buyer has to sell another property to buy this one. Very, very important. The 90% letter has to reflect the same as you have on this contract. So make sure you know that, and you've got the 9% letter. Sometimes the buyer doesn't think they have to sell another property, but when they go in and get pre-qualified, the lender says, nope, you do, or you have to lease. Because it's not the fact that they would qualify, but they don't have enough cash for the down payment, closing costs, and all that. So if they don't have the cash to do it, maybe they qualify for both payments, but they don't have the cash, then they still can't do it. So that's why it's super important they always get pre-qualified ahead of time, because it helps answer this question too, unless they're renting, then you already know. But if they own another home, that could be a factor. So I'm gonna go down through the blanks. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on the cost right this minute, because I'm still going to explain this contract to you real quick. But we will have a sheet that lays out, depending on the type of financing, which boxes to mark. And I have Tara actually working on a new one for me. and also some other helpful pieces, supplements that I'll give you guys next week that you'll add in. But yes, what you have there, Tony, that one's a little bit outdated. We're gonna get new ones, and I'll give those to you guys next week.
I do have a quick question about it.
Yes.
If you decide to like sweeten your offer
Yes.
with maybe paying some things in here that you wouldn't normally pay,
Yes.
or like particular, or like not contingent, on the lease or sales, would you then reiterate those in the terms and conditions so you make sure that the licensee saw it? Like buyer is paying appraisal, buyer is paying title insurance.
What I like to do, and I think it reflects better on your offer, because for one, you have to be sure that whoever you're submitting the offer to, that licensee is seasoned enough or experienced enough to understand which boxes should be on the seller side and which should be on the buyer side. And some don't know that. And they don't do a net sheet, they don't look at a cost sheet, all of that. I think it's always great to include a net sheet from your lender. Anytime you write an offer, get a net sheet so you can go over that with your buyer so your buyer understands. It also has a seller side, and give that to them so you have a built-in net sheet for this offer for the other licensee to show to their seller. It's a great business practice to do that. But what I prefer, Shelby, is you write it as a normal, conventional split.
Okay,
And then you write in the additional terms, buyer to pay $1,000 of the seller's closing cost, or $2,000, or whatever the number is.
okay,
And then it's super clear, when the seller reads it, they're like, oh, wait, they're paying my cost? And then it's a
Okay.
defined number. I think that is better. It's clean to do it that way, and I think there's no question of the benefit. It's super clear. So just like you would do for asking to pay a buyer's closing cost, some of you who just started, you're like, what? Seller pays buyer's closing cost in this market? No, but typically it's very common for a buyer to ask the seller to pay a certain dollar amount of their closing cost, prepays, and reserves. So it's kind of the same practice. You would also write that the common splits, and then you would ask the seller to pay that for the buyer. So that's kind of the same way I like to do it. So let's go to the next page, and we go down to title. You should have on the title. There's no reason to put title out along the way, like after the inspection and all that. They do have a cancellation fee. The title company charges a $250 cancellation fee to cancel the title before closing. However, I have never in 25 years seen a title company collect the $250 because they want your business, and they typically do not collect it. They may have to invoice it. They may have to tell you there's a fee, but they typically do not collect it. I've never seen them collect it. So just order the title. You'll probably never have to pay the $225. It's worth getting all that information up front. If there's liens on the title, there's liens on the buyer, liens on the seller, you want to know that up front. You don't want to know that right before closing. So order it early. The as-built, we're going to go down to 8I. We're going to go to the as-built a little bit. If you have, it's always the best interest of your buyer to get a new as-built, or make sure the as-built is updated. Gabe will say, well, how do you ever know it's updated? Well,
Certified.
I mean, to me, like, I'm standing at the property, I see a fence on the as-built, there's a fence here. It's, it doesn't look like it's moved in 20 years. The as-built is 10 years old. You have the deck, shows on the as-built, dimensions of the deck. So you should be able to somewhat figure out if there's a lot of changes or there aren't. Now, if you're looking at the as-built, there was a fence, there's a shed not showing on the as-built, it's not updated, you need to ask for a new one or need to be recertified. So you wanna make sure it's accurate. If it's like really tight quarters, you have an as-built, and it looks like, they said there was encroachment or things like that, that's a different kettle of worms. If it's a really old as-built, you'll wanna get a new one. So you kind of just use your own judgment there. But if you choose the box as required by lender, that pretty much means you're not asking for one. Because a lender's not gonna require one. They just don't ask for them.
How
So,
much are as-built?
huh?
How much are as-built?
To recertify them, typically $350, so I'd say between $350 and $550.
But if you're recertifying, you have to go back to your original surveyor, who's not always still around.
Correct.
And I think they're actually more expensive. A brand new one is more expensive.
It depends on who you use. Yeah, the brand new ones are more expensive than the certification.
Well, yeah, but I just think I think the prices on as-built period have gone up, haven't they?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit. I mean, there's some out there like Ken Lang and Associates. I always use him, and he's very reasonably priced. Shane Holt's like $650 for an as-built. He's really expensive.
He's grumpy too.
Yeah, he's
He
grumpy.
is.
So, you need to find a good surveyor that you like, and
So if you're selling a house and you ask your seller, do you have an as-built, and they don't, should we get one or not before we put a house on the market?
well, you can go to the title company and see if they can find one.
Okay.
A lot of times they can find it, so I would do that first. If you always order a listing packet, for your house, sometimes that'll come with it.
The property
A
profile.
Property profile, yeah.
Oh, see,
Not
I've
called
never
listing
done that.
packet, but property
Order a
profile for a listing. Mhm. Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna go back down to 9. Buyer has or has not received a copy of the settlement statement. They have or they have not.
AREC.
AREC, what'd I say?
Settlement statement.
Oh,
You
sorry.
said met property
Um,
disclosure.
The property disclosure and the AREC. So it's saying they have or they have not. Now, you understand that if the buyer has not received a copy of the property disclosure, they've not read it, they've not signed it at the time of submitting the offer, they have 3 days upon receiving that property disclosure to get out of the contract. So you want to request that up front. And plus, before you spend all the time writing an offer, get the property disclosure and review it. Because there could be, if the furnace is 30 years old, the roof's 30 years old, maybe this isn't, maybe they don't want to go forward.
There was a death in the house.
Yeah, exactly.
We've
Yeah,
had to submit offers saying, under the terms that they will receive a property disclosure by this date because they just put a waiver on there for
yeah,
whatever reason.
correct. And so if there's a waiver and you're writing the offer, you can still request them to do a property disclosure. Yes.
So I have had on offers in the past, I will check, has not received a state property
Right.
disclosure because they had the waiver.
Right.
And then they countered and they're like, no, they have, because it says disclosure statement and the waiver is technically a statement. So I never know which one to mark in that situation now if they do have the waiver. Have they received it or have they not? Because it is a statement.
No, they have not.
Because this is a form. The
Yes.
property disclosure statement is a form. You didn't receive that. You received a different form.
No, but the waiver says that exact title, State of Alaska, blah, 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 statement, and then it says waiver. So that is
isn't it
the
the-
title of the waiver.
Isn't it the buyer's decision to waive it? It's not the seller's decision to say,
Correct.
here, you have waived this.
Correct. So to say you received the property disclosure, if you actually get the property disclosure. If you get a waiver, you did not receive the property disclosure. So the seller can sign the waiver, the buyer does not have to accept a waiver. They do not have to accept a waiver. They can request the property disclosure. If the seller still refuses to provide a property disclosure, the buyer can say, well, I don't want to buy the property. But it's their choice to accept or not accept a waiver. Next, we're gonna go over a little bit today, so just want to let you guys know. The next part, we'll go into the physical inspection. So here, you can choose some inspectors that your clients have maybe used in the past or liked in the past or whatever. But you always want them to choose the inspector. It's their choice, not your choice. And you want them to be in control of that. It's okay if you call and schedule the inspection, because typically what'll happen is then the inspector is gonna send them an email and request funds, to be paid for and all that, and kind of tell them what to expect. But you have to, they should be the one to do it, because what you don't want is you don't want to say, oh, this is the best inspector ever. After closing, they missed something, they didn't see something, and then all of a sudden, guess whose fault it is? Yours, because you're the one that told them this was the best inspector on the planet, and now he missed something, and it's your fault. So let them make those decisions. It's okay to give them some names, tell them to still investigate on their own. They can Google, they can check, they can ask friends, they can read reviews, testimonials, and then get back to you on who they'd like to choose. That's the best conversation to have with them. We're gonna go to the next page. So you want to give, on the date for the inspection, we kind of talked about that. We said, 10 to 14 days, depending on how far out the inspectors are and the schedule of your client. You always want your client to be at the inspection, at least one of them, if at all possible. They don't just find out what's going on with the property. They do get photos, they get a report, all that. Sometimes they think, well, they're gonna have a report, they have pictures, why do I need to be there? Well, because you learn a lot about the house when you're walking through it. You learn like where the main shutoff is. You learn, certain tips and tricks about the house that you wouldn't know if you didn't do this, walk through with the inspector. I encourage all of you to be there with the inspector and your client when you do an inspection.
Are you required to be?
No,
If
you're not required.
if the buyer is there, you don't have to be there?
You don't have to be there.
Inspector's job.
The-
They have
inspector.
access.
The
Most of the
search is allowed.
I never not go unless I'm out of town. And even if I'm out of town, I try to make sure I schedule it when I am in
But
town.
if it's some other, like theoretically, let's say you're having a chimney inspection done and you can
Yeah.
give them a 1-day code, but then the buyer, like, can the buyer go with the chimney inspector without you?
I mean,
Or if you get
you're gonna have to
permission
give
from
them
the
access.
seller?
If you get permission from the seller,
If the
but
seller's like, yeah, that's fine if the licensee's not there, like if you're going camping or something.
but you need to get
And
permission.
it's during the sales meeting, so nobody else here is gonna wanna help you with that, in that situation.
But yes,
Does the seller's licensee ever go to those?
not typically. Once in a while they do, but not typically. I mean, usually, if you're the listing licensee, you're gonna tell the seller to go find something to do during that time. And it's just gonna be, it's the buyer and it's the buyer's time in the property to do their due diligence with their inspector. It's best that you aren't there because they're gonna ask you uncomfortable questions that you might not wanna answer. And so it's good to have them have that time together. So that's what I tell people. And it's a good education for you, but what you don't want is you don't become an expert over the inspector. You don't try to tell the inspector what to do. You just kind of sit back and watch. And they'll probably ask you, oh, wow, are we gonna get the seller to do this, or will they do that? And, they may ask the inspector, should I have the seller do this or fix this repair? And you would speak up at that point as, we're gonna get the whole report at the end, and then you and I will discuss what items to ask for at that time.
And as a realtor, if you're there, you're a lot more familiar with what is really a
100%.
big deal or what is
Right,
really
because
not a big
sometimes the
deal,
report, you
right?
can't tell, it looks
Right.
like a big deal and it was a small deal. or
Yes,
vice versa.
exactly. So you know the why behind it, or
Good
you,
business practice, yeah.
really good practice, really good, yeah. So you have to put these dates have to make sense. So you have to, what you also, people don't, well, I'm gonna explain that in a second. And then the appraisals, we're not gonna talk much about the dates here and go forward. The only thing I wanna talk about with the dates is the appraisal. So when you put on here no later than a specific date, so you have to come to agreement on repairs. This one says 6:30. So you come to agreement on repairs on 6:30. Then, let's look at our calendar. So there's a little problem with this date in this contract, and I'll tell you why.
That do it fast.
So, so what you wanna do, you wanna pay attention to the calendar, because if you come to agreement, so you come to an agreement on 6:30 at
Oh, I
6
see what
o'clock.
it-
Yeah.
okay.
So if you come to agreement on the 6:30 at 6 o'clock, so could you also make the same date for giving funds to the lender for the appraisal?
No.
No, because the bank's closed, exactly. So pay attention to that when you do your contract. So we have here 7/1 because that's the next day, which makes sense, except for 7/1's Friday, which would be fine.
The next day can't be, the 7th.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you could say, advance funds for the appraisal by 7/1, that would be fine. But in this case, you would say the lender to order the appraisal on be July 5th, because the 4th is a holiday. So they can't order it on that day. So you've got to make sure that these dates for the appraisal, when it has to do with the bank and taking money in, ordering things, that's done during business hours. You also can't have closing and recording on the weekend. So pay attention to the dates for your closing and recording. So I always like to say I'm gonna close on Wednesday, record on Thursday, if that at all works. Also remember, recording date's the day that it gets funded. The buyer has to come in the day before to sign the documents, not the recording date on your contract. So I wanted to go over that. So now, okay, I'm going to explain this contract. I told you I would. I can't do it in 15 minutes, probably 30, might go 15 over. But I'm gonna go ahead and pretend like you're the buyer. And I'm going to, normally I would be sitting across the table from you with a contract like this. Shelby, do you wanna do it?
I actually have to leave in 5, so